All right. So anyway, March is National Nutrition Month. So I wanted to bring a couple of different presentations this month, just touching on some different areas of nutrition. And this one is kind of near and dear to my heart personally. One of the big reasons I wanted to bring this presentation to everyone is because nutrition can be a little bit frustrating sometimes. So I kind of like the whole March Madness idea. And it's something that I've personally struggled with. I've watched many family members struggle with it. And so from a professional standpoint and from a personal standpoint, something that I can really relate to. So hello, there we go. One of the first things that I kind of want to talk about, which is really easy to do, is over or underestimating either food or activity. And either way, that can result in a lot of frustration. And again, I've seen that firsthand, but it's really easy to overestimate how many calories we're burning during workouts. And again, one of the big reasons I want to talk about this is because I literally hear this almost every day. And these are things I've been hearing from people for years, and again, have struggled with myself personally and have seen many family members struggle with it. And that is, especially around the beginning of the year, when folks maybe start trying to eat healthier, making some healthy changes, and start exercising, when they don't start seeing the results that they're looking for, it's really easy to get frustrated and kind of throw in the towel, even though, healthy changes are happening in the body, but sometimes we're not quite seeing the results that we're looking for. And it's not usually just one thing. It can usually be multiple factors. But what I really wanted to do today is hopefully at least give some folks the knowledge to be your own detective to kind of figure out what might be going on either end. So the reason I've got this part on here, don't get me wrong, I love my Apple Watch, but I have to tell you that the calorie burns on here are probably highly inaccurate. I think these things are great for things like, looking at your steps, or you want to close your ring so you end up moving more, and it inspires you to keep moving so you can meet your goals and all that. But unfortunately, the only way to really see how many calories that we are burning for a particular workout is to do a test where we're measuring how much oxygen you're breathing in, how much carbon dioxide you're breathing out, and it's highly variable among people. So just personally myself, I can tell you, I think these things are great for a lot of things. However, it very rarely has the correct heart rate on it. And it really kind of overestimates the mileage that I'm putting in and things like that. So I think what will happen very often is people look at this and feel like, oh, wow, I burned an extra 1,000 calories today. That means I can eat an extra 1,000, which is fine. But if the goal is losing body fat, that's going to kind of backfire. And something else that kind of really drives me crazy, so I have to call it out, and that is during group exercise classes, there are many places that teach classes where when you walk in the door, the instructor tells you, you're going to burn 500 calories during this workout. Probably not. My body is going to burn a lot fewer calories than someone that has a lot more muscle than I am or is taller than I am. So I just want people to be aware that we need to be very wary of that and typically round down. Most people tend to round up. So going on here, without getting too far in the weeds on this one, and I linked in the chat, the first thing I linked there is the slide deck. So if you want to click on that, this is here for you. And of course, I will also make sure it's available on the SharePoint afterwards. But I always like to point out a caloric deficit, if the goal is body fat loss, is 3,500 calories over however long of a time. So that's typically what our bodies need in order to shed 1 pound of fat. And reasonable is about 1% of your body weight per week. I put this in here. It's a link to an estimated calorie burn. And again, it is going to be very much a rough estimate, but it's at least going to take into account your gender, your size, and things like that, just to give you a ballpark. But I can tell you, after years and years and years of doing clinical exercise tests on people and having them done on myself, I have seen some younger men burn in excess of 25 calories a minute, whereas I've seen women in their 50s and 60s struggle to burn 8 calories a minute when they feel like they can hardly go any harder. So it actually really is highly variable. So I just want to emphasize that. So those are just some ballpark estimates. And again, you're going to have this just in case you want to refer back to it. But I always do also like to point out that if a goal is fat loss, and I refer to that a lot because I hear it so much, I also do hear from a lot of folks that they want to build muscle or they have some kind of performance goal. And of course, we need to take that into account either way. But for most people, if they've maintained their weight for more than 6 months, my first inclination is really to add activity first rather than subtracting calories, because our bodies are usually going to perform better that way. You're going to automatically start carrying more lean mass. Your bodies are going to become more efficient. And the more fit you get, the more oxygen you can take in, the more calories you'll end up burning. So that I feel like is a really good place to start. But I always have to point out there as well, and I'm going to talk more about this next week too, it is still really easy to out-eat a workout, especially if you're overestimating how many calories you're burning from that, even with, quote, healthy food. And I've seen that myself a lot. I don't eat much of anything that's processed at all. And, you know, I work out a lot, but if I start having a little too much fun with my favorite Japanese sweet potatoes, and for a couple of weeks I'm eating a lot more of them, my body's going to store it. I feel like I already do have that genetic predisposition. And that's a very frustrating thing when you're like, I'm working out like crazy. I don't eat any junk food. What's going on? And at the end of the day, your body needs a certain amount. And if you eat more than what your body needs, it's going to have to put it somewhere. It doesn't matter at the end of the day where those calories came from. So just because a food is healthy for us doesn't mean that if we don't eat more of it than we need, that our body's not going to put it somewhere. So here's where a little more of equipping you to become a detective comes in. So measuring our calorie burns is hard, but here's the other thing. It's so easy to underestimate the amount of calories that we're taking in. And a lot of that, like what's on the plates here, that doesn't look like a big deal. And on any given day, it's not. But if we're consistently, constantly taking in more than we realize, that's going to add up, just like my sweet potatoes. You know, so we just have to kind of be aware. And I really think that's where giving you a little bit more knowledge about that is going to be hopefully really helpful. So we're going to talk more about portion distortion next week. But a lot of things that we forget about, and I'll talk about this more in a second, is a lot of folks, even when they're cooking and things like that, you know, they tend to taste stuff. Maybe they're going to, you know, lick something. I find this a lot with parents who tend to clean their kids' plates. That can be a big thing. So I just thought this was a really powerful graphic. I do encourage folks to track their nutrition, at least for a little while. I don't want people to get into being really obsessive about it, but I think initially, even if it's just for, you know, a few weeks or a month or two, to really get a good handle on what you're actually putting in your body, that is powerful, so that you actually know. I mean, as long as I've been doing this, and even with myself, like 90% of the time, if I'm like, all right, I know I'm putting the workouts in and I hardly change my nutrition, so how come suddenly I've got a little more, you know, fluffy wherever I don't want it? Usually if I start writing things down, I'll be like, oh yeah, all right, I got a lot more of that. I've been having a lot more of this. And it really helps you to be aware of it. So very often what will happen is people will record one thing and then kind of forget about like, oh, well, I had this coffee. What did you have in your coffee? Maybe there was a lot there. And it can add up over time. It's not so much anything on one given day, it's what we do consistently. And that's what this graph is basically showing you here, is that what we do regularly and consistently is what is going to give us results one way or the other. And like on any given day, if, you know, we feel like, oh goodness, maybe I had whatever I didn't want to or something like that. That doesn't mess you up. If you're, taking in what your body needs 80 or 90% of the time, that's not going to make much of a difference at all. And in fact, any consistency is going to produce the results. But I feel like we need to have that mindset of just knowing that it may take longer to get where we want to be if we're not as consistent as we want to be. And to give ourselves the permission to do that and to know you don't have to give up everything you love. I always encourage folks that I work with, I want you to be able to enjoy, the celebrations in your life, the gatherings in your life without worrying about it, and just equip you with the knowledge for what to do with that. So, all right, I just found all these great graphics and I had to go ahead and throw this one in there because the one on the right here, it kind of shows exactly what I'm talking about. Like if this was, what you ate for one day and this is what you ate for another day and that was a third, having something on the weekend just every once in a while, like that's not going to mess you up. Not at all. Again, it's what we do regularly, consistently that's going to add up. And I'm going to talk more about some of this stuff next week and really get into like how to navigate the grocery store, how to navigate food labels and things like that. But the reason I wanted to put this on here, some of these things even really surprised me as I was looking for them. And that is, it's really easy to feel like, oh, I'm having this healthier snack. Like, why would I have this Domino's pizza? I'm not advocating either one. What I'm advocating is checking it out, doing your research, knowing what you're actually putting in your body, because sometimes what feels really healthy can have a lot more than we expect that it's going to. So I have to tell you, some of these ones kind of surprised me too. So for folks that eat out regularly, I do feel like there can be a little bit bigger struggle there if the research isn't kind of done ahead of time. Because I talk to people all the time, they're like, yeah, I order out, but I only ever get the salad and I only eat half of it or whatever. And if you're touching some of the nutrition facts on some of these salads, like this one floored me. It really did. I'm looking at that California Pizza Kitchen Waldorf chicken salad. It's grilled chicken. It's not fried. It's got grapes in it. It's got walnuts in it and wholly bananas, 1,320 calories. Like that's almost what you need for a whole day. And the fat intakes on some of these are what really takes it over the top. The American Heart Association recommends keeping our fat intake below 60 grams per day, even if it's healthy fat. So you can see that some of these salads are packing a lot more than that, just for one thing, and it's what feels like is really healthy. Now, I want to back up a little bit though and say, are most of these foods healthy for you? Yes. The fiber, the vegetables, all that stuff is great, but it's some of the things that we put on top of it. 99% of the time, it's the dressings and it's the crunchy, textury stuff that we put on top of it that can get people in trouble without realizing it at all. And the reason I put this in here is because a lot of folks, they feel like during the week, maybe they prepare their meals, or even if they don't, maybe they eat very well in their mind during the week. And then every weekend is like there's something going on and they're going out and, maybe eating at restaurants, picking what seems healthy. But if you get a ton more on the weekend and it's regular, that can kind of bump your weekly, daily average up to a lot higher than you think. So again, I'm just trying to give you some tools to help you be a detective, because I've seen it so often. And 99% of the time when folks start to keep track of what they're taking in, it's like, wow, I had no idea I was getting that much. So that's where I'm trying to go with this. The other place that I want to just really quickly touch on with that is that going the opposite direction, extreme calorie restriction for long periods of time can actually be very damaging. So without getting too far in the weeds, just a super quick example. So extreme calorie restriction, and what I mean by that is eating less than like 1,200 calories, or even eating less than that. A few days, that's not going to really hurt you, but if people are trying to do that over and over, kind of what's going to happen is it's going to work initially, and then their bodies are going to start breaking down lean muscle tissue. And if we're not giving our bodies enough calories to sustain what we're doing, Women actually will end up losing their menstrual cycles. Men will end up with reductions in testosterone. Like all sorts of nasty things can happen. Your hunger hormones start going up, all sorts of things. Now, if our bodies land up breaking down lean muscle tissue, what that means is that our metabolisms go down. So the vicious cycle folks get in is sometimes they'll go on these lower, really low calorie diets for a little bit. They lose some muscle. The next thing you know, they're starting to gain weight on what they used to lose weight on because they've broken down too much lean muscle tissue. And that's very metabolically active. And that is going to lower their metabolism overall. So basically all this slide is showing is a couple points I want to emphasize just here really quick. And that is when we tell ourselves we're going to stop having certain things, sometimes there's that feeling of like, oh, I don't want to give that up, or it kind of sets us up mentally to crave certain things or whatever. But sometimes those processed foods that we really like, they kind of do some things to our brain that's not ideal. It makes us want more and things like that. One of the strategies I really like to employ with folks is doing what I call like a half and half, because we are going to eat for a feeling of fullness. Very few people just go, oh, well, that's so many calories I need, I'm just going to stop now. No, it's like we have this innate feeling that we're looking for that certain pressure in our stomach. And if we can increase the volume of our food with vegetables, with things that have very few calories, then we're going to be full a little bit quicker. And we're probably automatically going to have a little bit fewer calories. And so instead of taking away something, we're looking at, all right, what if I bring this in, but I still have this? One of my favorite ones to start with is something like spaghetti. You love spaghetti. Okay, awesome, have spaghetti. Maybe you do half spaghetti squash, half spaghetti. So you're still getting that taste and that texture that you want, but you're actually having a lot more fiber. You're probably going to get full more quickly, and you're still having that satisfaction. So I just wanted to touch on that super quickly. All right, here's another thing that almost hardly ever gets considered. And so again, I'm bringing this out because sometimes, you know, folks that feel like, gosh, I've made all these healthy changes and I'm working out and I'm still not getting where I want to be. Could this be a factor? It could. Is it the only factor? Probably not. But all these little factors together can make a big difference. So the big thing I want to kind of harp on here, and again, any place you see something underlined, it's a link taking you to the study that I'm quoting for this. And that is because our bodies are at least 70% water for a normal adult. If we are dehydrated, none of our body functions are going to work very well. And the biggest take home on this is study after study after study shows that a body, a cell that is dehydrated cannot mobilize free fatty acids for fuel. So your fat metabolism is going to slow down if you're not adequately hydrated. And the other part of that is that hunger and thirst feel the same. So it's really easy to feel like, gosh, I'm really hungry. But if you haven't been drinking a lot of water that day and it's mostly been things that might dehydrate you, I always encourage folks, you know what, before you have a snack, before you eat anything, do yourself a favor and just drink 6 ounces of water. It doesn't even have to be a full glass. Give yourself 2 or 3 minutes even, see how you feel. If you're still hungry, eat. If not, awesome. Well, then you got, you know, hydrated a little bit more. And so we kind of 2 birds with 1 stone there. I do always get the question, you know, how much water do I need? And my answer is, it depends. It depends on how much you move around during the day, how much you sweat, you know, if you've got underlying factors. Realistically, most people need 1/2 to 1 ounce per pound of body weight, but that's still, again, going to very much depend on what you're doing. So great article linked there in case anyone wants to explore that a little bit more. But bonus, by adding more fruits and vegetables, we also accomplish that. So we get volume, we get fiber, we kind of automatically get fewer calories with more volume. And because there's so much water in fruits and vegetables, it also goes towards our hydration. So that can really help to kick our metabolisms in the butt. So that's just a nice reference for you. Another factor that gets super overlooked, and there's so much research on this. I actually was very involved in a lot of this stuff when I was working in Flagstaff running the diabetes prevention program, because they were really trying to see how like type 2 diabetes fit in with sleep or lack of sleep. Because we know that if we're not able to get regular sleep, and granted, there's so many reasons for that. People have kids, you know, stress, I mean, whatever it is, even sleep apnea. But if that's a challenge, if it's a challenge to get at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep regularly, we're going to see this cascade of events. So metabolic rate starts to go down, in part because many of these hormones are very much regulated when we get into that deep REM sleep. So we'll have a decrease in circulating thyroid stimulating hormone, an increase in our hunger hormones, a decrease in our satiety hormones, and a decrease in insulin sensitivity. So what that means is our bodies are less able to deal with our blood sugar. And I'll kind of get into that here a little bit more in a second, but there's just a really strong correlation there. So again, is that the 100% thing? Maybe not. But if we start tying in, maybe I'm not getting enough water, maybe I'm not getting enough sleep. The sleep is one of the most restorative things you can actually do. And there are, again, so many studies that have shown people that are sleep deprived, and this is usually done like putting electrodes on their brain, giving them images of, which kinds of foods they want, stuff like that, and seeing what happens. And what researchers have pretty much figured out is that when people consistently get less than 6 hours of sleep a night, they not only want more like salty, fat, sweet stuff like that, they kind of want more junk food, but it affects the decision-making center of our brain. So it's kind of like, all right, I'm tired, I stayed up all night, I want donuts, and I'm going to eat them and I don't care. That's kind of where it goes. But you can think about a time where maybe you didn't sleep very well and the types of foods you end up wanting. We start kind of migrating towards things that are going to wake us up a little bit more. So that can kind of be part of the struggle as well. All right, insulin regulation. Why am I talking about that? Well, it really does bear talking about. This may not be a factor for some people at all, but for some people, it might be a major factor, especially if anyone has a history of type 2 diabetes in their family. That may suggest that there's already a genetic disposition to maybe not manage blood sugar as well. So the big thing I want to highlight here is that insulin is the gatekeeper for all nutrients going in our cells. And if it's working properly, then most of the nutrients are going to go where we want them to, into muscle cells, into other cells of the body. But if it's not working very well, when the blood sugar gets high, insulin's job is to bring it down because our bodies won't work that way. And if we've got too much sugar and it can't get into the muscle cells and stuff where it wants it, it's going to put it right into fat storage. So insulin is one of our major fat storage hormones. And I don't think that gets talked about very much. So again, I want to hammer home, this may not be an issue for some people, but this is one of the main reasons that things like intermittent fasting will work really well for some people and will completely backfire for other people. The hormonal regulation is highly variable. So for anyone that has a family history, I do think it warrants at least looking into it. But maintaining our insulin throughout the day is what's going to be really important to hopefully make sure that our bodies are not taking what we've eaten and just put it in storage, as fat. Some folks can get away with this really, really well. Eating small, frequent meals throughout the day is not something everyone has to do, but if someone's struggling with it, I recommend trying it, because what that's going to do, I like to explain it kind of like a fire too. If you wanted to light a fire, the photo on the top here would kind of represent like going and getting a giant log and just sitting there with a lighter underneath it, kind of hoping it's going to catch fire. Well, and it might, but whenever it does, it's probably going to burn very slowly and take a long time. Whereas down here, I kind of like to explain that like I'm building a fire. I'm going to put a bunch of little sticks in there, and then I'm going to light it, and it's going to burn hot, it's going to burn fast, but it's going to go out fast. So I need to keep putting more little sticks in. And that's where this whole thermic effect of food comes in. That is literally the amount of calories it takes your body to digest what you're eating. So you actually, by taking the same amount of calories and spreading it throughout the day, so these two should represent the same amount of calories, just dispersed differently, we're going to get a higher thermic effect of food with this one. And I will throw this out there, ladies, I'm sorry, but intermittent fasting, because I get questions about it all the time, it tends to work pretty well for men, but not men who are have a family history of diabetes. For women, it often backfires because of the hormonal regulation. So I just have to throw that out there. So what's going to keep that insulin sensitivity high? stuff you've probably heard from me all the time. And again, for some folks, it may not be as big of an issue, but exercising, especially resistance training, so like lifting weights, really tends to make sure that most of what we eat goes to the muscle cells, not to fat storage. And the other issue with eating like this is simply like, think Thanksgiving. If we eat way more than our bodies can use at one time and our blood sugar starts to go up, the insulin gets released because it has to bring it down. So if we all of a sudden have way more sugar in our blood than we can use, our body is going to put what it can into like the muscle cells, and it's going to store the rest of it for later. Kind of the opposite of what we want. So this I'm going to throw out really quickly. What kinds of things are going to lower cellular insulin sensitivity? Fried foods, not moving a lot. This I'm putting in here. This is a link to an article. This is, again, not an issue for everyone, and it's not proven. But there's a lot of studies being done between the consumption of artificial sweeteners, especially in things like diet sodas, mostly consumed by themselves, because researchers have noticed in a very large population of people, it tends to really mess with their metabolism, with their blood sugar regulation, and increase hunger hormones. So it's worth throwing out there just to consider. All right, last thing, and I want to leave a few seconds for questions here, and that is nutrient timing. And this is not something everyone needs to be concerned about, but for people that are struggling, if we can take our same calories and kind of program them around our workouts a little bit more, we may end up using them a lot more efficiently. And what I mean by that is after a workout, especially a more intense one, where your heart rate's really up and you're breathing really heavy, we have a window after that workout when our muscles are going to absorb almost everything that we put in it. So that, like, the first 30 minutes is the highest, and the farther away from the workout we get, the lower that is. So if we're actually eating a little bit more right around the workout, we're going to process it a little bit better. So again, not something everyone needs to worry about, but definitely worth considering. A couple other things that may deserve consideration that I'm not going to get into the weeds with today, but that people might want to check with their doctor. And that is especially hormonal fluctuations, people who are on any kind of hormone regulation, or especially postmenopausal. That's a huge thing. And that can really affect how we metabolize things. Food allergies can be a factor. Any chronic disease condition can throw your metabolism into a tailspin. Chronic stress, and then GI issues. So if there are still other issues that just don't make sense, I definitely recommend checking with a doctor just to see. So here is just linked all of the resources in addition to the ones that were kind of throughout this presentation, if anyone wants to explore those. And of course, Exos at Home, that's where you can find current calendar, all sorts of events, learn how to connect with me if you don't already know, so that I can help anyone who wants it to figure some of these things out. So I am going to now stop sharing, and I know we're kind of right at the end.